Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown. Safer for pedestrians, bicyclist friendly, with great curb appeal. That's the plan for a very specific area, Reimagining Expo Square. I'm delighted to be joined today by Councilmember Curren Price from District 9, as well as the project manager, Christine Unger Renew. Now, we're going to actually talk to you about the project, but we really want to talk to Councilman Price for a couple of minutes. And by the way, we also really want to hear from you. We want your questions. So feel free to give us a call at 213-978-0000 or ask questions on Facebook, because we're going to have lots of answers here in this virtual town hall. Okay, so let's get to the very basics. What is Reimagining Expo Square?
Well, first of all, thanks for having us here today. It's so important that we communicate with our citizens, especially during this time.
Sure.
But Expo Square is an exciting project in CD9 and in the city of Los Angeles. We're talking about reimagining those communities, those neighborhoods, those streets around Exposition Park, specifically Vermont Avenue, King Boulevard, as well as Figueroa. We want to make sure these streets are beautiful, that they're accessible, that they're safe. Mm-hmm. And so we're excited about the prospects of having streetscape improvements, more landscaping, furniture, all the amenities that will make the area even more attractive. We know, for example, it's home to the LA Memorial Coliseum,
sure.
The new soccer stadium, the Lucas Museum is under construction, $1 billion project under construction now in Expo Park. But in addition, we've got the Natural History Museum that's going to be undergoing some renovation. We've got the African American Museum in Expo Park, and the Science Center, which is going to be doing some expansion too. So tremendous activities going on in Expo Park. And so we want to make it a place that's going to be fun and safe, not only for the thousands and thousands of visitors who are going to be coming, but also for the citizens who live nearby. And so that's the purpose of our Reimagining Expo Square, and our desire to get ideas, suggestions about what kinds of improvements are possible, what we'd like to see happen.
Well, and that's one of the reasons we're here today, because you obviously have some ideas, you have some plans, but you want to hear feedback. You want to make sure that people have an opportunity to participate. So this is a really cool idea that you decided to have this, even in this time, this virtual town hall.
Well, you know, the COVID crisis has made us kind of rethink and redo lots of things. But we are certainly intent on getting citizen input,
sure.
citizen ideas on these public projects, especially projects like this one. And so we've adopted a virtual approach, but we certainly are soliciting ideas and thoughts and suggestions nonetheless. This is going to be one of the series of meetings we have on this project. And so we're excited to have the project manager here with us to provide some additional detail. But more importantly, we want to let citizens know that they've got a role to play. And so we're encouraging them to make their feelings known via questions or online, Facebook, or in writing, or by phone.
Sure.
We're anxious to hear from them.
You mentioned a lot of iconic places there in Exposition Park and a lot of the plans that are happening, but even the streets have historic value. I mean, Martin Luther King Boulevard has very sincere historic value.
Well, it does, and you know, it's significant that we're doing work there on King Boulevard. Martin Luther King certainly was known for his advocacy as a fierce advocate for human rights, for civil rights. He was also concerned about transportation issues, not the least of which, of course, the bus boycott at the time. But he was certainly interested in making sure that our communities have access to the kind of infrastructure, the kinds of resources that are available in other communities. And so for so long, the area around Expo Park has been disinvested. We've seen lots of tremendous investments in the park, but this represents an opportunity to provide some investments in the neighborhood, in our streets, on our corridors, making it more attractive, more accessible, and a real part of the Expo Park community.
I'm curious, when did you actually start thinking about this? Because there's a lot happening in your district, and the new 9 is really named appropriately because things are shifting and things are growing, and you're really cognizant of your responsibility.
I don't want to take complete credit. This certainly has been in gestation for many years. As I said, this is an iconic part of our community, and so there have been lots of ideas about making improvements. In fact, there's a master plan underway now about Expo Park itself, the interior. So it's only appropriate that we look at the streets surrounding that park. And so I'm excited to work closely with our planning department, professionals, and neighbors, getting ideas, getting suggestions. Folks have said they want to see street furniture. You know, they want to see expanded sidewalks. They want to make sure that the sidewalks are ADA compliant. I want to see, as I said, we have street furniture, that we have better lighting. There are all kinds of things that we can do on these streets, and so it's important that we get the ideas, certainly listen to the experts, but we want some ideas from our neighbors and friends also about what they'd like to see.
And I imagine that also includes the businesses that are along these streets.
Absolutely. Everyone has a role to play, and everyone's voice counts.
All right. Well, we're excited to hear about the plan, but we'll be talking to you in a few minutes, but let's go ahead and see where we are. So as I said, Christina Ungarino, she is the Senior Director of RCH Studios, and you have some preliminary ideas of where you've gone and what you're doing. And Christine, just in general, you have a lot of experience with urban planning.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. So yes, I've been with RTH Studios for about the last year and a half, but I've had a very fruitful career so far, doing urban planning and urban design work. I've worked in New Orleans, I've worked in New York City, I've worked in the Bay Area, and I'm just really excited to call Los Angeles home and to be involved in a project like this.
Well, we're really excited to see how things are so far and what some of the opportunities are. So please share a little bit.
Great. So I'm going to spend about the next 10-12 minutes going through a brief presentation that gives you a little bit of context and understanding of how we came to these initial conceptual design proposals. So we'll begin just real quickly by flashing on the screen the phone number. So throughout the duration of this this virtual open house, make sure that you're using this phone number to call in and share your questions, or share your questions online via Facebook. We have a project website. There's lots of amazing information on there about the project context, the background, the initial traffic analysis that we've done. So that's at this bit.ly link here on the screen. And then make sure to take our survey. That's one of the best ways for us to hear from you about what you think about these proposed conceptual designs for Expo Square. So going into real quickly the study area, we're working and operating in this H that you see here. So Vermont and Figueroa between Exposition Boulevard and West 42nd Street, and then MLK from Vermont as it extends all the way to the 110 highway overpass. We have two kind of interwoven goals for this project. It's to increase the safety, the perceived and actual safety of these streets, and to increase the placemaking quality of these streets. So we're trying to reduce and eliminate collisions that lead to serious injuries, and we're trying to strengthen the neighborhoods around Expo Park so they can reach those amazing regional destinations, but also get there in a really memorable and enjoyable way to regional destinations as well as local destinations like local businesses and your home and your schools. So we started RCH Studios started as the consultant on the project back in the summer of 2019. We start, like we do with all of our projects, with a very comprehensive understanding of the project area through research and analysis. We've held a couple of focus groups with the neighborhood councils in the area. We've held intercept surveys. We had the pleasure of being with Councilmember Price's office at Ciclavia in South LA a couple months ago. Here we are today at the virtual open house, and then we'll take all this amazing feedback that you're giving to us and integrate it into a final conceptual plan later this summer. Here's some images from our time at Ciclavia. Really miss being outdoors in this environment. I'll say that now. So as we start any streetscape project, as designers, as traffic engineers, we want to understand where we're coming from. So we looked at about 10 years of traffic crash analysis data for these corridors in the study area. What we found was a little bit frightening. 413 collisions on Vermont Avenue alone, 100 of which resulted in serious or visible injuries. Figueroa, 90 of those collisions resulted in serious or visible injuries. King Boulevard, lion's share, 130 serious or visible injuries caused by these crashes, and unfortunately 1 pedestrian fatality. So we as designers, as planners, as traffic engineers, what we do is reach into our toolkit. We reach into our toolkit of infrastructural, landscape, signage interventions in order to reach those dual goals, right, of safety and placemaking. So these are some of the tools that we thought were the most appropriate to apply along these corridors conceptually. So I'll go over them really quickly. We looked at pedestrian activated crossings, so new locations for pedestrian activated crossings. At many areas along these corridors, there's long stretches where you actually don't have the opportunity to cross to the other side of the road for a long time. Sometimes pedestrians take the life into their own hands and they cross without a marked crossing. So we're trying to decrease the number of times that happens. Pedestrian refuge islands and medians and curb extensions also provide better and more enhanced crossings for pedestrians. We looked at improving existing crosswalks and even integrating some newer types of crosswalk typology. So these are scrambled crosswalks or raised crosswalks. This is where you're actually able to traverse as a pedestrian in any direction because all lights are red for moving vehicles at these types of intersections. We looked at the potential to integrate a bike lane on MLK. MLK is actually part of the citywide bicycle plan for a regional protected bike lane. So we wanted to make sure that as we're doing this placemaking and safety improvement project that we're thinking about how to integrate a bike lane into this corridor. We looked at parklets, opportunities for new trees, opportunities for enhanced seating. And then environmental graphics, right? How do you use art, signage, wayfinding to make this district more inviting, more comfortable for the users that live there? This is a map of how we've deployed initially at a conceptual level these improvements. You could spend a lot of time with this map online, like I mentioned. But we thought the best way to show you what these improvements really feel like is a little before and after kind of visioning, imagining, right? So I'll take you through a couple of these and show you the types of toolkit items that we felt we could apply in these intersections. This is just the beginning. This is where we really want your feedback. So here we are on Vermont at 40th Place. There's actually a school over here on the left-hand side. You can see here no crossing exists today. So we thought it would be an excellent opportunity to integrate a continental crosswalk. And that also opens up the opportunity to plant and install curb extensions. So what curb extensions do is that they create a shorter crossing distance for pedestrians, especially children with those little legs of theirs, so that they're in the way of traffic for a much less period of time, much lower period of time. Also opportunities for wayfinding, signage, experiential environmental graphics in this area. Moving down Vermont, we're here at 42nd Street, an important retail corridor for the community, for the neighborhood. One idea that we had that we want to hear your thoughts on is integrating parklets into this area. So this is a chance for businesses to have outdoor seating space that can be planted. It's safely protected from moving vehicles, and it's a chance for you to enjoy that Southern California sunshine and sit outside, drink your coffee, have your meal. Here we are at Figueroa. This is a 5-lane, well, 2 lanes each way and a turn lane in the center. Again, an amazing and great candidate for a pedestrian refuge island and a continental crosswalk. This refuge island also gives us the opportunity to integrate signage and additional landscape treatments and the addition of potential street trees as well along the sidewalks. Under the 110 underpass, this is you feel very far away from the park when you're on the west side of this underpass. So we felt strongly that smaller improvements, even like signage and wayfinding and art, can really make this place a little bit more inviting and the perception of safety a little bit higher so that folks are much more encouraged to cross over from the west side into the Expo Park, Expo Square neighborhood. So I'll spend the last couple of minutes walking through the three options that we're putting forward to you, to the community members for King Boulevard. So the reason we have three options for King Boulevard is that there's a trade-off that community members and all folks involved in this project need to make. And that is for how we grow the sidewalk space on the south side of MLK depends on how much space from the vehicular right-of-way we are able and willing to trade off for growing that space. So the first option I'll show you is the no lane reduction option. And in the Q&A, we can get into how we did traffic analysis that made this option seem viable to us at the preliminary stage. But option one is the baseline option. It's no lane removal, and it's forcing us to ask, what can we do given the amount of limited sidewalk space that we have there on the south side of MLK today? So what we can do is retain that 5 or 6 feet of sidewalk space. We can't grow it any further. We're not able to add any more landscaping or any more street trees on that particular side, but we would be able to plant medians where those turn lanes are not turn lanes and when they're not being utilized. We would be able to integrate banners and wayfinding signage to make this space more inviting. And at this particular intersection at Hoover and King, we'd even be able to look at a scrambled crosswalk with some signage and art and wayfinding actually painted onto the ground plane. Option two looks at what do you gain if you get one lane of traffic out of the way and you convert it into more sidewalk space. This gives us about 7 or 8 feet of walkable space on the sidewalk. It gives us room for a one-way bike lane going westbound. And that bike lane has enough room in this situation to actually be protected from vehicular traffic. And our 2-lane removal option, this is where we take 2 lanes of traffic from MLK. That still retains 2 lanes of traffic going in each direction, so there's 4 lanes still remaining on MLK. And what that gains is a sidewalk space that's actually 12 feet, which is the kind of type of sidewalk space that you'd imagine in a 21st century district like this, with the amazing improvements that are underway at Expo Park. And it also gives you potential to put in what we call a couplet, a bike lane that's going in both directions, so that you have the ability to go westbound and eastbound safely within a protected bike lane. So stop there. I'll quit boring you. But we'd love to hear Q&A from you. Make sure you go to our website, take our survey, and call in.
Well, it's absolutely fascinating, and I have no doubt that there are going to be many, many, many questions. So we will be right back in just a couple minutes. Stay with us. We have a lot to share with you, and we want to hear your feedback. So Councilman Price will be back with you in a bit. Christine will be back with you in a bit, but we want to make sure you stick around. Hi, and welcome back. We are now joined by Holly Harper, LA Planning Urban Design Studio, as well as Christine. We've heard a lot of information. I'm sure there's a lot of questions, but I just want to go through a couple things that stood out to me while we were talking. First of all, really great terminology. Lots of really interesting assets that are part of all these potential plans. I'm learning about things like a couplet, which is basically a 2-lane bike, right? Is that true? All right, okay. Wayfinding, which is signage, okay? And then a parklet, which is now my favorite word. Lots of little parklets. Let's put lots of parklets. Anyways. So anyway, so I know people have a lot of questions, and I have some very specific ones that I'd like to get to. So, and forgive me because these are ones that have been sent in, so I'm just going to read them. My husband and I walk around the Coliseum for exercise, and we found that the sidewalk on the south side of MLK, which you actually addressed, between Figueroa and Menlo is very narrow, so there are many options there. Is there a possibility for the sidewalk to be widened so that a couple can walk side by side? And I'm going to add, and in this era of social distancing, an opportunity for people to have space.
I'll take that one.
Okay.
Great question. This is exactly what we want to hear is, if you're having challenges navigating that sidewalk, we want to know how we can make it better. So in option 2 and 3 that I showed you for that stretch of MLK, we'd be able to grow the sidewalk either to about 7 or 8 feet in option 2, and option 3 to about 12 feet. So it's really at the 12-foot measure where you're actually doing effective social distancing if somebody's trying to pass you. 7 or 8 feet, it gets a little bit tighter. And that additional space also gives the opportunity to plant shade trees and to provide additional street furniture and to enhance those bus stops. So those all contribute to kind of a better walkable environment, more inviting environment. That's a great question.
Holly, how did actually LA get involved with RC Studios? How did this happen actually? I'm kind of curious as the backstory.
Sure. Well, it started with the councilman. You know, he in negotiating with the Bank of California Stadium, they executed a pretty good development agreement. So in exchange for the stadium building on that site, they did put money into a fund that helped fund this initial studies. So that's really, you know, what made the project possible for us to get off the ground. And again, you know, this is just at these beginning points where we're looking for people to tell us what they do like, what they don't like, what they might be concerned about or confused by. And so in starting the project, I don't know if you want to go into the you know, the background of it really is coming from a place of public safety. I mean, as Christina mentioned, right? You know, kind of a public health perspective, where even if someone might not know someone who's been hurt, the collision record is pretty clear, and it's one reason that all 3 of these segments of these important streets are on the city's high injury network. And what that is you know, the relatively about 6% of our streets that account for 70% of our serious injuries and deaths. So it's a way to, you know, use evidence to point the improvements to really help prevent injuries and save lives.
Yeah, there was a kind of a frightening statistic that Christine went through during her presentation about the vehicular injury, the vehicular accidents, and then unfortunately the death of pedestrians. So, you know, the safety component of this, I imagine, is a huge priority. Okay, so let's go back to something that you said while you were giving the presentation about the traffic flow on these streets and what was taken into consideration when you proposed the different options and how that would impact traffic. Because that's the other thing, is that safety of the pedestrians, safety of the bicyclists, you know, visual improvement and comfort for everyone who lives, but is also has to be mitigated against, is everybody going to be sitting in their car at a stoplight forever and ever and ever, or is there going to be so much traffic that people aren't going to want to use the streets themselves?
A really important question, and one that we took on from the very beginning of the project. In order for us to even begin to think about different options for reconfiguring Martin Luther King Boulevard, we had to consider the current traffic situation on those 6 lanes of traffic today. We worked really closely with one of our consultants, Sam Schwartz Engineering. They do a lot of mobility and accessibility work all over the nation, award-winning work. And what RCH Studios and Sam Schwartz did is we went out there in early September 2019. We laid out traffic counters at various points along MLK, and we counted the amount of vehicles that were using that space for 7 consecutive days over 24 hours. What we did with that data is we took it, we analyzed it, and it told us 2 things that made us really hopeful about a potential lane reconfiguration strategy for that stretch of MLK. It told us that according to LADOT standards and guidelines, the MLK corridor right now is not actually used at its capacity. It's operating below capacity.
Interesting.
That's based on those 7 days of counts. And what's interesting is that during those 7 days of counts, there were three major games happening at the stadium during that time, or in Expo Park at that time. So we were able to capture the high and the low. And even then, very few instances where the street was operating above capacity. So below capacity, and then secondly, that gave us hope that a complete streets application of interventions on this corridor could be possible given that analysis and data. And the other thing I'll add is that all of that raw data, all of that analysis was shared really collaboratively with LADOT. So we're always kind of following their standards, their guidelines, their regulations. And the last thing I'll say about traffic analysis for now is that there's more traffic analysis to be done. You know, those 7 days of counts is not where we're going to stop. We're going to, through the detailed design process, through the implementation process, make sure that we're capturing the delay analysis, the regional implications of a potential lane configuration, and continue to work with our partners at City Planning, LADOT, Bureau of Engineering, and the neighbors, really, to help them understand what that data is saying.
Well, because this is a moving target too, because as Councilman Price very clearly outlined before we began, you know, there's a lot more that's going to take place in Exposition Park. There's a lot of growth that's planned, and so I would imagine that the traffic flow is going to change as those plans progress and those construction opportunities are seen. Yeah. All right. Well, I have more questions. You can't go anywhere. All right. So here's from another concerned person. How is this project looking at the broader streets within the community? And here's an example. There are many people who walk the neighborhood. Many kids play outside. There are many cars that speed, making it unsafe. Are there thoughts about speed bumps and other features being added to enhance the safety? An example from 41st Street between Hoover and Figueroa. Does the city look for grants for this kind of work?
We do. And there has been some work that's already been done. You know, there was a Safe Routes to Schools project that's been implemented for the Menlo Avenue Elementary. So a lot of those types of improvements to local streets. And you would put, you know, a kind of intervention like a speed hump normally on a local street where you want to, you know, really trim it down, but you don't put those on major avenues where you might, you know, delay emergency response times. And so 41st Street in particular, I don't know, I know some of the intersections with Menlo and Hoover, I think, have gotten some of those treatments.
Oh, great. Is there a difference between a hump and a bump? I don't know why. I mean, it was just all of a sudden they became speed humps instead. I know that's silly. I'm being ridiculous.
They just started calling them something different. They used to say bumps, now it says hump. I don't know.
Okay, please make sure if you have questions to give us a call or, you know, ask a question on our Facebook page. I have lots to do here, but I will share this concern, and I have no doubt that this has been addressed. For many in the community, English is in fact a second language, and you talk about wayfinding. What is being done to ensure that new wayfinding signs are easily read and understood by, you know, anyone who might be there?
Well, I think a lot of it will be done visually as much as possible. You know, elements that can give color or, you know, kind of a cultural identity or a flavor to a place don't necessarily need to point you in 8, 20, 30 different languages, correct? So sort of naming of areas, certainly celebrating the life of the Reverend King, I think, is a great opportunity, because it's not just how do I get to Expo Aquatic Center, but, you know, why is this street named as a memorial to the Reverend? Right now there's no little sense other than a couple of signs that really celebrate his life or why this was chosen. So,
oh, interesting.
Yeah, so some things could be done, you know, in pictures and visuals and things that don't necessarily have to be translated into, what do we speak, something like 80 languages in this city.
And I'm such a huge arts advocate, and I really loved the idea of just, you know, celebrating the community and the visual, graphic, and or artistic elements that would be considered and put into a plan like that.
And also just, you know, very specific to this day's presentation and the next couple of weeks, we will be putting up, you know, Spanish subtitles on this presentation. People can push SAP on their television channel right now. Really encouraging people to, again, give us their comments, whether it's on the website. Are you sure, is this the same number for Spanish speakers, or do we have a separate number for Spanish speakers?
That's a really good question. And I will defer to my expert who is off screen, and we'll get back to you in a couple seconds. And speaking of questions that have come in, one of the questions is, what can be done to bridge the North and South MLK Boulevard communities?
Yeah, I would say that's another you know, very important objective of this whole project. There's some, council member mentioned some of the museum expansions, the Lucas Museum of Narrative Art that's under, you know, soon to be completed in this next year. And the park itself is part of, you know, they're going under a whole new master plan to really make extensive changes. And obviously the Olympics in 2028 is an important impetus for that work. So they're going to, I think the state may have some hiccups in the next couple of years fiscally, but I think there's a big push to really implement a lot of those improvements. And some of them have to do with, you know, the park itself, especially as it faces the north with the Rose Garden and the cultural institutions, is very inviting and friendly and very well integrated with the USC campus. And then as you get further south, you'll notice it's really not a very inviting aspect of the community, right? What you see now is just asphalt parking lots, the backs of buses behind a steel bar fence. But some of the improvements that the Exposition Park and the state are contemplating are taking all of the surface parking for the whole park, putting it underground, and then converting that edge that is just not very attractive or park-like into what they call a festival lawn. So it'd be just a big open green space for, you know, just families or picnics or events. And that starts to, you know, all these improvements being invested in the park itself, and, you know, the northern parts of Figueroa and even Vermont are pretty well improved. When you get south of that, one of the reasons we really look at MLK as the opportunity zone is just because that kind of park-like feel, we want to bring that into the neighborhood and definitely extend it to those streets toward the south, toward 42nd Street. So those small businesses and the people walking to school and to their errands can have just as nice of experience as visitors to the park.
It's nice to hear that there are long-term plans, that we're excited about this new introduction of Reimagining Expo Square, but that it actually piggybacks on things that are happening in the future, which leads me to my, first of all, yes, it is the same phone number, so please feel free, 213-978-0000 if you have any questions, or on the Facebook page. But this leads to your point about expanding and plans for the future. Will the bike routes that you're contemplating be leaving and connecting to vital areas? Will they be continuing so that you can take your bike further?
Well, that's why Martin Luther King shows up on the mobility plan, on the city's bike planning, because it's really, you know, if you picture the shape of our city, it's one of those major east-west corridors that is the only kind of continuous way to get from South LA all the way to the city boundary with Culver City. And that's, you know, then you're close to there, to connecting to the Ballona Creek bike path and onto the ocean. And we know we have the MyFig bicycle lane improvements that extend from the park north. The part of Figueroa from MLK down to Gage is also on that high injury network's kind of priority list of projects. So we'll hope there'll be some safety and bicycle accessibility improvements there. And we've identified some other funds that we can match together with specific grants. We'll go out to realize whatever our preferred option for this project is.
So here is a more technical question, I believe. The reconfiguration of MLK, might the intersection of MLK and Menlo Bill Robertson Lane be adjusted because the north and southbound streets are not aligned, which has contributed to unsafe situations and, as you so aptly mentioned, accidents?
I know that intersection well, and there have been, you know, a lot of pedestrian vehicular conflicts there, and vehicular conflicts there as well. As part of this project itself, we haven't looked at reconfiguring intersections to that extent, where we're actually completely realigning that particular area, although that feedback's really important, and we'll take it back as we get into more detailed design. So I'm glad that.
Which is one of the reasons you're here.
Yes, that's why we're here, and we want to hear it.
Yes. One of the questions that just came in, the Expo event traffic. There's concern about that moving into the residential neighborhoods. So is there anything that can be done to sort of safeguard and or mitigate that?
Well, the event traffic, we were thinking that would be a particular flashpoint for congestion, but if you've ever been in that area, one of the things that our traffic counts revealed is that our DOT and our LAPD are very good about controlling the flow of traffic in and out, and some of the improvements, for example, they're being done together with the Lucas Museum, also have to do with event flows, and because the streets to the south and the west of the park don't have a lot of through connections, right? All the north-south streets, they're not as attractive for people to be pushed off onto local streets. And the DOT did do a model of kind of what would happen, where would traffic be expected to be pushed, and it really wasn't into the neighborhoods. It was really just to the south, to Slauson.
Well, that's good to hear, and it's nice to know that there has been that kind of concern and observation. There is a lot of beautification in regards to what you are looking for, and some of it is preserving trees, and some of it is adding trees. So I know that there's concern about what type of trees, because trees can wreak havoc or they can be bastions of solace. So how are you determining that, and how is that being managed?
Well, I'd say that the existing Canary Island pines out there have been a focus. There's been numerous kind of day of service events and other community events where those have been planted and maintained and named and loved over the years. We're not proposing removing any of those. Over time, there's always some that are probably served their purpose. They're not particularly aggressive species, so even though they're very tall, they really are not causing majority of the problems with the sidewalks. Those, especially the 2-lane reduction, starts to give us the opportunity to not only add some landscaping, but maybe more trees in the middle. I think we would look at complementing those species, because you don't necessarily want a monoculture of all one thing, because if the Canary Island borer beetle shows up, or some other pest that's specific to that. So we'd probably balance it. We've had suggestions like there's a tree species called Podocarpus or Afrocarpus.
What does that look like?
It's like a big evergreen tree with gray-green leaves on it, but it's another. We would only look at things that are very tough, right? Very resistant to pests, very able to thrive on our what we typically get in a rain year once they've been established. We'd like to move maybe some. They would be keyed to how much space they have. Where we have wider space, like the new medians, where we could interrupt the central left turn lane on MLK. Those could be the bigger shade trees, where we have smaller, more constrained spaces. Other sort of smaller scale, but maybe flowering trees, like a pink trumpet tree was suggested. There's some other, more decorative, we focus on shade, but where there really just are very constricted spaces, you don't want to put a large growing tree that would cause problems.
This is one of your areas of expertise. I mean, you're very, I know that you've had a lot of experience in regards to green belts and sustainability and all that kind of thing. So, I mean, this is kind of a fun thing to think about too.
Oh yeah.
And the tree species haven't been selected yet. This is exactly the kind of feedback that we want to hear. And anything that we put in the ground, we want to make sure that it's maintainable and operable, and that it doesn't bust up the sidewalk in a couple of years.
Right.
As much as possible.
Right. Well, along those lines of, things that are not pleasant, someone does say that they have a question regarding the stagnant water on the corner of MLK and Kansas. When it rains, water pools in the corner for weeks, and obviously it makes it very difficult for most people, but in particular people with disabilities, to get around. Is this going to help manage just drainage and accessibility for those that might have some things to consider?
Well, I think Kansas is outside of our study area right now, but we're definitely looking at, these are kind of study blocks in a sense, where the feedback we get here, we could propose, larger extents to the project to deal with things like that. But in general, more landscape and more green space and less concrete tends to help those situations.
And I did rather mention this a little bit with Councilman Price about, getting information from people who have a vested interest in all of this, and that includes the businesses. Are the businesses participating? Will the storefronts be updated? Is there an opportunity for those that have those businesses to participate in this? I don't want to use the word beautification. I want to, reimagining.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they went, the same notifications that went out to 10,000 households included the businesses in the areas to the south and west and east of the park. And it was also an important the original development agreement that Councilman Price negotiated was really focused on MLK, because they thought the impact is there, and they want to, ameliorate that to the maximum extent. But that's one reason he really extended the boundaries on the north-south streets down to 42nd Street, because while there's a lot of new development and affordable housing and different things coming in, there's a lot of small businesses there that could just really use a boost.
Again, one of these phrases, calming traffic versus slowing traffic. Is there a difference? Is there any kind of, defining space here?
Traffic calming is, what the definition of that phrase is to allow for the flow and access of vehicles and traffic and all users of the street, while ensuring that crashes are minimized and reduced so that people are kind of protected, right? That's what traffic calming measures help do. That's the goal of them. Now, there is a lot of empirical data out there and research that has been done that shows that the speed at which a vehicle is moving has a lot of influence on if that vehicle is involved in a crash, the outcome of how well that person will do, right? So a vehicle moving at 35 miles an hour or less, there's a much lower chance that if that vehicle comes into contact with a pedestrian, that pedestrian would be seriously injured or killed. Now, if you raise that speed to 5 miles an hour, or 5 miles an hour more, 10 miles an hour more, 15 miles an hour more, at about 50 miles an hour, you're talking about a very high likelihood that a pedestrian coming into contact with that vehicle is going to be seriously injured or killed. Now, what's interesting is that the study area, that yellow H that I showed, they're actually the posted speed limits are 35 miles an hour on all of them. But I think what's interesting is that the context clues around you as a driver that you should be keeping that speed limit or going below it are sometimes not there. So
Wide open street, everybody thinks.
Wide open street, you're not sharing the street with a bicyclist, there's not a lot of pedestrians around, not a lot of crossings, right? We talked about adding continental crossings at certain points. So when you don't have those contextual clues as a driver, I mean, I'm guilty of it sometimes myself, is I think I could go a couple miles an hour faster.
Or you don't even realize
and you don't even realize it.
So part of what we saw in the plan were the medians, and then of course, how is that going to impact left turn traffic into the businesses, et cetera?
Well, those have only been placed where they're not interrupting a driveway, and we're lucky that there aren't that many driveways off of MLK. A lot of the multifamily residences there, the apartment buildings, have an alley, and a lot of their dedicated traffic of people getting to their parking space is not accessed directly from the street. But yes, those are where Rios Clemente Hill Studios showed the pieces of MLK's median. Those are the part of the left turn lane that doesn't need to be continuous. They would still have, every time they need to make a left turn or enter a driveway, it would just be the start-stop of planting and then left turn lane.
And also the safety measures put into place for these parklets. We were chatting a little bit before we had the opportunity to share with everyone. There are mitigating factors that are going to go in to make sure that if somebody is enjoying a nice afternoon in the sun right next to the street, that they will not be
Exactly.
in
There's
harm's way.
There's LADOT guidelines that are very explicit about how parklets are built in the city of LA. So all of those guidelines would be covered. I'll just go through some of them at a high level. They have to be protected on all sides. So sometimes that's done with a planted buffer, for example, or a bollard, and they have to be, most times I think, required to be raised at the same level as the cross or as the sidewalk, so that you're kind of visibly separated from moving vehicles.
Besides the fact that they're really cute, and I love their name, why are they an asset? Why do they benefit anyone? Why would they be included in the plan? Beautification, trees, whatever they end up to be, safety measures for pedestrians and for bicyclists, but where do the parklets add?
So they add great opportunities for new planting, new vegetation. They can also be used as mobility hubs, so you can integrate bike docking stations, scooter docking stations into them. They give the opportunity again to go outside and enjoy the outdoors. And I think what's really important about integrating parklets into kind of any neighborhood is to make sure that you're consulting the businesses and the residents and the neighbors of where that parklet is placed. So the placement of them is really important. And we have some preliminary ideas of where they could go, but this is exactly where we're putting it out to the residents in the community to hear back from them if they would actually welcome the parklet there.
Well, yes, exactly. So please make your questions known. We have the phone number 213-978-0000 or questions on Facebook. But along the timeline, how long will you be listening to the concerns and the thoughts of your constituency?
Well, I think until the project is finished, which
Okay.
could be years from now. I mean, this really is like an iterative process. I mean, you put something out there like we're doing today. We hear what people say about it, what they like, what they don't like, and then over the summer we'll be sort of taking all that in, working together with our planning staff, our planning staff at Council District 9, all the city departments, and looking at from what people have said, what is our preferred option. It's probably not going to be all one thing or another. We'll probably take elements depending on what the appetite is for repurposing actual asphalt traffic lanes into wider sidewalks. So then it's really going out to get grants, but we'll also be coming back to the community. So once we have this preferred option, it's coming back and saying, well, now this is what we heard back in May. This is what we sort of reality checked, and coming back to you. We don't have budget numbers at this point either, because we want to figure out what the plan really is before we start to break that down and then come back. And there may be still some trade-offs, like some options, like we could do this, but it would cost this much more. Those kind of things.
And also, given the current state of unsurety in all realms, I have no doubt that things are going to have to be adaptable. Timelines are going to have to be adjustable, and people are going to have to, be a little bit patient. But I just really want to thank, you, Holly, and I really want to thank you, Christine, for these amazing answers. We have, a lot more to talk about, so don't go away. Make sure that you call in with your questions. Make sure you ask questions via the Facebook page. But we will be right back in just a minute. And welcome back. Be sure to send us your questions. We'd love to have them answered. We're delighted to be joined again by Councilman Price. A little bit was touched on with Holly about how this all came into being, but it was truly because of the construction of the new stadium that sort of helped, did it not?
Well, it did. It was one of the many community benefits that we were able to negotiate with the LA Football Company when they came in. One was to provide some resources so that we could do a study about improving the circulation around Expo Park, around the soccer stadium, and in our community. And the timing was excellent because we've been doing similar work on Figueroa with the My Figueroa project. As was mentioned earlier, the Coliseum is undergoing, Expo Park is undergoing a plan, a revisioning plan. And so now was the right time to make these improvements that are going to impact the neighborhoods surrounding Expo Park.
So in a project like this, no island, you're not an island, you're obviously a coordinated effort. So are there multiple conversations going on external to your district to sort of make sure that this is all cohesive? We've spoken a little bit about making sure that it's all part of the bike plan, et cetera. So I imagine there's a lot of players at the table.
It is. We're glad to have a good team of consultants on the job. Of course, our planning department is also taking the lead in working with us. So there are lots of sources of input, and not the least of which are citizens, neighbors who have a chance to chime in, but their ideas about trees, about bike lanes, about more wider sidewalks, better landscaping. These are street furniture. These are all the issues that are on the table, and we're excited to have the input from neighbors to help us make these decisions. And we are trying to turn around the years of disinvestment that have occurred in our community and in this area. You heard some startling numbers about the number of accidents, for example, on each of the streets over the years. And of course, with the increased activity in Expo Park, with the increased attractions, with the new planning that's going forward, we want to make sure that, as I said before, the hundreds of thousands of visitors are able to move smoothly in and out in a safe manner. And we also want the citizens who live right around the Expo Park to be able to access the park in a free, safe, and a convenient manner.
It seems as time progresses, there's a dynamism that's happening in Los Angeles, and a lot of young people, a lot of energy going back into urban areas, a lot of artistic endeavors, and a lot of desire to be walking and riding your bike instead of being in your car.
Exactly.
I would imagine you're seeing that in District 9.
Well, we are, and that's one of the reasons why in the proposed plans we talk about bike lanes, for example, wider sidewalks so people can walk. We know that there is a increasing dependence on Uber and Lyft and alternative modes of getting around. And so we want to make sure that the infrastructure is flexible enough to accommodate existing and new uses in a way, as I said, that's safe, that helps to beautify, and it's very accessible to those that are in the park.
And I'll add that everybody who's a driver in the end is a pedestrian, right? Your first and your last mile, what we call it in the traffic planning world, transportation planning world. In the end, we want to make sure that the street is equitably divided among all of these users, and the more interest there is and the more placemaking qualities there are to these streets, the more we're actually going to be able to take some of those local trips that maybe you got in your car to do. Right. Might be able to hop on your bike or walk. So this is a plan for the 21st century. This is a plan for our children who are going to work and are going to go to their colleges and their universities to take alternative modes of traffic. So we're thinking that far.
The streets around Expo Park have been part of the legacy for the last 100 years of Expo Park, and we want to create an environment that's going to permit our neighborhoods to be ready for the next 100 years around this iconic public space that we call Expo Square.
I'm going to throw a little ringer in here that I haven't heard yet, and I'm sure it's a concern. There are other ways of mobility these days, which include scooters and scooters for rent. There have been issues in urban areas. There have been positive attributes for them, but have you, like me, as if I'm involved, have you considered that as well?
So we spent some time at watching the scooters go back and forth, particularly before and after the games at the stadium, and that option 2 and 3 of the MLK proposal that we showed you of the integration of the bike lane, that is not just for bicycles. That's space that scooters can use to get to and from the stadium, and to kind of go on their merry way and not take up precious sidewalk space.
Right, and we know, minutes away from Expo Square, of course, is the University of Southern California, and again, thousands of young people using a variety of intermodal techniques, bicycles, scooters. Skateboarding, etc. And so again, we want to be flexible. We want to make it a safe environment. We want it to be beautiful, and we want it to be accessible to all.
This is an impossible question, so you can just say, I don't know, but you've done so much work so far, and then we hit a pandemic, which obviously created an opportunity for a virtual town hall. But is there any timeline here at all? Do you have any idea of when you want to actually break ground or anything?
I don't know. We're moving forward with the planning. That's the first step. I know we are certainly working on lining up the financing based on what the plan is going to be.
Right.
But you certainly have the commitment of the council office that we're going to be moving forward as expeditiously as possible. And we appreciate the support of our consultants and of the department, the planning department, to make that happen.
I think one excellent thing that can come out of this, even before there are permanent improvements made in the ground, this is happening on 7th Street right now downtown, is you could integrate temporary improvements just to understand how the roadways would operate, let's say with a bike lane put in place or a slightly enlarged sidewalk put in place. So those are the types of things that we could do a little bit earlier. Those things also cost money, but there are ways in which we can address the issue earlier on.
And we're also sensitive to not only pedestrians, but to the businesses
Sure.
that are along these corridors as well. And again, our ability to improve the traffic flow, make it more pedestrian friendly, all go to supporting our small local businesses in this very important corridor.
Well, it's an exciting project. Congratulations. It's been a delight to speak with you, Councilman Price. Christine, thank you for all of your hard work. Really looking forward to hearing more feedback from everyone, but I really want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon, and make sure you call in with your questions and get in touch. We want to hear what you need to say.